My name is Amber Whitmore. That night, after a 14-hour ICU shift, I came home to a beautifully set dinner table, candles flickering gently, and a divorce petition placed neatly beside my plate. My husband sat across from me, silent, offering only a slight nod when I looked at the signature line. I had never signed anything. But the paper had my signature, along with legal certification from my father-in-law. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply that you couldn't believe what you were seeing, right in your own home? This wasn't just about divorce. It was a calculated plan, laid out long before, step by step, word by word, stroke by stroke. If you've ever been treated like an obstacle in your own life, stay with me, share this story, and leave a comment. I still don't know what lies ahead, but it all started with that dinner. I held the divorce papers in hands that still smelled faintly of rubbing alcohol, muscles aching after a long shift. The paper was thick, hardbound, notarized, with each page aligned so precisely it looked like it had been waiting there for weeks. At the bottom of page 3 was my signature, almost perfect, except I had never put pen to anything involving divorce. When did you do this? My voice was hoarse, not from emotion, but from too many hours behind a mask and swallowing back exhaustion. Landon didn't answer right away. He poured a glass of wine, set it in front of me, and sank into his chair like a man wrapping up a performance. Didn't you always say you were too exhausted to keep going? He said, voice calm to the point of emptiness. You don't have to carry everything anymore. We can do this the easy way. That's why I helped you. Helped me. I gave a faint laugh, pushed the wine aside, and ran my hand down to the witness signature. At the very bottom, in familiar slanted writing, Marshall Whitmore, my father-in-law. A careful, stern man, never doing anything that didn't benefit the family name. He was also the one who told me on my wedding day, I don't care much for doctors, but nurses are tolerable, as long as they know their place. 4 years ago, I didn't respond. But today, I felt something shift. Quietly, I pulled out my phone and opened the photo vault. I had saved images of our prenuptial agreement, the day I locked the original in a secure vault at the hospital, accessible only by me and the head of medical records. I scrolled to the important parts, the asset list, separation terms, and divorce clauses. It was clear. This house was in my name, purchased before marriage with a student loan I spent nearly a decade paying off. But in the version Landon put before me, that clause had been changed. Not just changed, rewritten in handwriting almost identical to mine. Careful, rounded, no tremble. I didn't sign this, I said, eyes fixed on the page. You sure? Landon shrugged, still wearing the calm demeanor of someone proposing a reasonable solution. Maybe you were too tired and forgot, or I cut him off. You said I didn't have to carry things anymore. What about this? This house? The one I bought before I ever met you. Why does this document say joint marital property? Landon looked at me like a physician facing a panicked patient. Amber, do you realize how much stress you're under? Maybe we talked about it already, and you just don't remember. I'm just trying to get you out of the pressure loop. I wanted to scream. But I knew Landon didn't respond to emotions. He responded to evidence, to logic, to plans. And so did I. I had lived too long in a family where everything was tracked, calculated, measured, but never understood. I folded the paper, tucked it into my bag, then walked to our bedroom, pulled out my old laptop, and opened the handwriting comparison software, the same one I used to review medical charts for patients with cognitive issues. I took a photo of the Amber Whitmore signature from the divorce paper and ran it against my original saved signature from the prenup. The analysis returned 90% match, but signs of model tracing detected. My hands trembled. It felt like someone had been peeling away layers of trust from me, slowly, carefully, without me even knowing. I called Danica, my best friend and a forensic lab tech at the hospital. I need a handwriting pressure and fingerprint analysis, I said. Forged signature? She asked bluntly. Not just that. Someone's staging a marriage just to end it on their terms, I replied flatly. Danica agreed to help, quietly. I sealed the divorce papers in an envelope and handed them to her personally the next morning, no hospital mailroom involved. 3 days later, Results hit my private email. 2 dominant fingerprints on the documents, one mine, confirmed. The other, my mother-in-law, Irene Whitmore. I froze. She didn't live with us. She rarely visited without notice. But I knew one thing. She was a retired head nurse, meticulous and sharp, known for controlling patients without meds. She once smiled and told me, "A strong woman isn't the one who's loved. She's the one who knows when to step back to preserve family dignity." Back then, I thought it was old-fashioned wisdom. Now, I heard it as a warning. I started reviewing our home security cameras, something I rarely touched since Landon managed the system. But my account was logged out. My old password no longer worked. I didn't panic. I went to the hospital records office, where I kept the original prenup. I asked to inspect the vault. The document was there, intact, in sealed packaging. I examined it closely. The witness line was blank. On the version from the dinner table, it was filled in. Marshall Whitmore. I photographed both, stored them on a separate hard drive. That night, Landon returned from a board meeting. I was reading through the revised clauses when he walked in. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice unusually soft. "Trying to understand why your mother's fingerprints are on a divorce petition I never signed," I answered without looking up. Landon fell silent. After a long pause, he finally said, "She just wanted to make sure everything was in order, in case things got hard." "And what does hard mean? Me being sleep-deprived? Working too much? Or me finally seeing things you didn't want me to?" He bit his lip. His hands on the table trembled slightly. I looked at him, holding my breath steady. "Are you trying to protect our family, or are you carrying out someone's plan to erase me from it?" And right then, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, but hesitation. "My name is Amber Whitmore." That night, after a 14-hour shift in the ICU, I came home to a neatly set dinner table, soft candlelight, and a divorce petition placed right next to my plate. My husband sat across from me, silent, giving a slight nod when I glanced at the signature line. I had never signed it. But there it was, my signature, along with a notarization from my father-in-law. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply that you couldn't believe what you were seeing, right in your own home? This wasn't just a divorce. It was a deliberate plan, carefully constructed step by step, word by word, ink stroke by ink stroke. If you've ever been treated like an obstacle in your own life, stay here, listen to this story, and don't forget to leave a comment. I still don't know what lies ahead, but it all started with that dinner. I picked up the divorce papers with hands that still smelled faintly of antiseptic, sore from a long shift. Thick paper, hard cover, notarized, each page aligned perfectly like it had been waiting there for a long time. At the bottom of page 3 was my signature, almost perfect, except I had never signed anything related to divorce. "When did you do this?" My voice was hoarse, not from emotion, but from hours of wearing a mask and swallowing down fatigue. Landon didn't answer right away. He poured wine, set the glass in front of me, and sat back down like someone who had just completed a performance. "Didn't you say you were too exhausted to keep going?" he said in a tone so calm it felt hollow. "You don't have to carry the weight anymore. We can resolve everything peacefully. That's why I did this for you. Did this for me." I let out a dry laugh, set the wine glass aside, ran my finger down to the witness name. At the bottom of the page, in familiar slanted handwriting, was the name, Marshall Whitmore, my father-in-law. A meticulous man, stern. Never did anything unless it benefited his family line. He once told me on my wedding day, "I don't like doctors, but nurses are acceptable, as long as they know their place." I didn't respond back then. But today, something inside me shifted. I quietly took out my phone, opened my photo archive. A snapshot of the prenuptial agreement I had stored the day I locked away the original in a secure hospital vault, accessible only by me and the head of medical records. I scrolled to the important section. List of personal assets, separation terms, and divorce clauses. Clear as day. This house was in my name, purchased before marriage using a student loan I'd spent nearly a decade paying off. But in the version Landon laid before me, that clause had been altered. Not just changed, rewritten in handwriting identical to mine. Neat, rounded, steady. I didn't sign this, I said, eyes locked on the paper. Are you sure? Landon shrugged, smiling like a man offering a rational solution. Maybe you were too tired, don't remember, or I cut him off. You just said I don't need to carry the weight anymore. Then what about this? This house. The one I bought before I even met you. Why does this say it became joint marital property? Landon looked at me like he was sitting across from a patient in crisis. Amber, do you realize how much stress you're under? Maybe we discussed it and you just don't remember. I'm just helping you off the treadmill. I wanted to scream. But I knew Landon didn't respond to emotion. He responded to evidence, logic, planning. And so did I. I had lived too long in a family where everything was annotated, calculated, measured, but never understood. I folded the paper, tucked it into my bag. Then I stood up, went to the bedroom, grabbed my old laptop, and opened a handwriting comparison program, the same kind I used when evaluating patients with memory confusion. I took a photo of the Amber Whitmore signature from the divorce paper and compared it to the original signature from the prenup. The result, 90% match, but with signs of tracing. My hands shook. It felt like someone was peeling away layers of trust from me, slowly, subtly, without me noticing. I called Danica, my best friend, also the hospital's forensic analyst. I need a handwriting pressure and fingerprint test, I said. Forged signature? She asked bluntly. More than that. Someone's reconstructing a marriage to end it on their own terms, I replied, flat-toned. Danica agreed to help, discreetly. I sealed the divorce papers in an envelope and handed them to her the next morning, bypassing hospital mail. 3 days later, the results hit my personal email. 2 primary fingerprints on the document. One was mine, valid. The other belonged to my mother-in-law, Irene Whitmore. I froze. Irene didn't live with us. She rarely entered our home unannounced. But I knew one thing. She was a former head nurse, retired 6 years ago. A sharp, calculated woman, known for managing patients without medication. She once smiled at me and said, "A strong woman isn't one who gets love. She's the one who knows when to step back to protect the family's name." Back then, I thought it was a traditional piece of wisdom. Now, I saw it as a warning. I checked the home security cameras, something I rarely paid attention to because Landon managed the system. I opened the app, only to find my account logged out. Old password? No longer valid. I didn't panic. I went to the hospital's medical records vault, where my prenup original was stored. Requested access to the secure box. The agreement was still there, intact, sealed. I examined it closely. The witness line on the original was blank. The one on our dinner table version was filled in, Marshall Whitmore. I photographed everything and backed it up. That evening, Landon came home from a board meeting. I was reading through clauses when he entered. "What are you doing?" he asked, voice unusually soft. "Figuring out why your mother's fingerprint is on a divorce petition I never signed," I answered directly. Landon was quiet. After a long pause, he said, "She just wanted to make sure everything was ready in case things got hard." "And by hard you mean what? Me not sleeping? Working too much? Or maybe starting to notice things you didn't want me to see?" He bit his lip. His hands, resting on the table, trembled slightly. I looked at him, keeping my heartbeat steady. "Are you sure you're protecting this family, or just executing someone's plan to erase me from it?" And in that moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, but hesitation. Right then, I knew. I wasn't the first person he'd done this to. And I needed to find out who came before me, and what happened to them. Don't take your eyes off this story. In the next part, I discover an old video, and inside it, something I still haven't been able to watch a second time. I opened my laptop, hands slightly trembling, plugged in the USB drive, and took a deep breath like I was stepping into an old, dust-covered room in my memory. The video was stored in a folder titled simply, October, Hallway Check. I had forgotten I saved it, but back then, When I was suspicious, quietly overwhelmed by Landon's growing coldness, I had copied it, hid it, and forgotten. The screen lit up in black and white. Timestamp in the top right, 3:41 p.m., October 19th. I remembered that day, a cold Wednesday afternoon. I had worked 2 back-to-back shifts, and Landon had said he was meeting a friend at the hospital. The footage opened in the third-floor hallway, near the physical medical record archive, accessible only to a few high-level badge holders. About 10 seconds in, Landon appeared on the left side of the screen. Gray shirt, neatly combed hair, walked straight to the door, scanned his badge, entered. He wasn't alone. Following him was an older woman, wearing a white lab coat and beige medical gloves. I held my breath. I knew that posture. The way she tilted her head when walking, the decisiveness in her steps, and that perfectly tight bun. Military precision. It was my mother-in-law, Irene Whitmore. I paused the video, zoomed in. Her profile was crystal clear. No mistake. Not a coincidence. I hit play again. They both walked in. Irene led the way. She opened cabinet C23, pulled out a green file, used for short-term inpatient psychiatric evaluations. She took out several sheets, handed them to Landon. He nodded. Then she turned, opened another drawer, pulled another file, this one orange, slipped one sheet into the green file, then carefully sealed the folder with tape. The entire action took less than 3 minutes. But it was calm, precise, and familiar, like she had done it before. I stared at the screen, numb. I never imagined she'd involve herself in my professional domain, let alone like this. I opened the hospital's treatment record system. Searched my name, Amber Whitmore. Everything looked normal. Vaccine history, 1 ankle injury, 1 syncopal episode due to sleep deprivation. Then I searched the off-system archive, where sensitive files were stored. There it was, a PDF labeled EM1POC 192. Flag do not display to patient. I opened it. At the top, my full name, spelled correctly, birth date accurate. Notes, diagnosis: adjustment disorder with emotional dysregulation, suboptimal stress response. Recommendation: restrict major financial decisions for 6 months. Require oversight by close family member. Evaluator: Dr. Feng Whitmore, clinical psychologist, retired. I stared at the signature. Dr. Feng Whitmore. I had heard that name long ago, during a family meeting at their hilltop home, when they talked about how grandmother was a pioneer in public health reform in rural Minnesota. Grandmother, Veronica Whitmore. I had met her once, at our engagement party. She barely spoke. Shook my hand, eyes scanning my face like X-rays. Cold, assessing, clinical. Now I knew. That look wasn't distance. It was evaluation. I printed the file, page by page. Laid it next to the video. I compared the signature from this document to the one on the prenup. Uncannily similar, only refined, adjusted to look different. I opened another envelope, where I kept all my personal medical history from college, old prescriptions, routine checkups. Not a single line mentioning psychological issues. Never needed treatment. Never hospitalized for mental health. So where did this file come from? And who used it? For what? I thought of the divorce papers, the asset clause, how diminished financial capacity could strip me of authority over high-value properties, like our current house or my shares in a small medical venture. I sat motionless long after that. The computer had gone to sleep. Outside, the night was eerily quiet. But inside me, a storm was forming, not because they deceived me, but because I once believed they never would. I wrote one line in my journal. They think I'm weak. They think I'm too busy to notice. They think I'd never revisit that video. But I did. And now I see exactly who they are. I closed my laptop, stood up, and went to find the certified copy of our marriage license from the safe. It was time to compare every period, every signature, every clause, and trace how I was being erased with pen strokes. I gathered all printed documents, the fake psych evaluation, the divorce papers, screenshots of Irene in the medical records archive, and tucked them into an old brown leather bag I once carried as a nursing resident. My hands still trembled as I zipped it closed, not out of fear, but because I knew I couldn't face this alone. I called Avery, my college friend, now a civil rights and family law attorney. She picked up on the second ring. "Amber?" Her voice always cut through like fog. "I need to see you. Not as a friend, as a lawyer." She paused for 1 second, then asked, "When?" "Right now. My name is Amber Whitmore." That night, after a 14-hour shift in the ICU, I came home to a neatly set dinner table, soft candlelight, and a divorce petition placed right next to my plate. My husband sat across from me in silence, nodding slightly when I glanced at the signature line. I had never signed it. But there it was, my signature, along with legal notarization from my father-in-law. Have you ever been betrayed so deeply you couldn't believe what you were seeing, right inside your own home? This wasn't just a divorce. It was a deliberate plan, built in advance, step by step, word by word, stroke by stroke. If you've ever been treated like an obstacle in your own life, stay, share this story, and don't forget to leave a comment. I still don't know what's waiting for me ahead, but it all started with that dinner. I picked up the divorce papers with hands still faintly smelling of antiseptic, sore from a long shift. Thick paper, hard cover, notarized, each page aligned perfectly like it had been sitting there for a long time. At the bottom of page 3 was my signature, almost perfect, except I had never signed anything related to divorce. "When did you do this?" My voice was hoarse, not from emotion, but from hours behind a mask, swallowing down fatigue. Landon didn't answer right away. He poured wine, set the glass in front of me, and sat back down like someone who had just finished a performance. "Didn't you always say you were too exhausted to keep going?" he said in a tone so calm it felt hollow. "You don't have to carry the burden anymore. We can settle everything quietly. That's why I did this for you." "Did this for me?" I let out a dry laugh, moved the wine glass aside, ran my finger down to the witness name. At the bottom of the page, in familiar slanted handwriting, was the name. Marshall Whitmore, my father-in-law. A meticulous man. Stern. Never did anything unless it benefited his bloodline. He once told me on our wedding day, "I don't like doctors. But nurses are acceptable, as long as they know their place." 4 years ago, I didn't respond. But today, I felt something very different. I quietly pulled out my phone, opened my photo archive. A photo of our prenuptial agreement I'd saved the day I locked the original inside the hospital's secure vault, a vault only I and the head of medical records could access. I scrolled to the crucial part: list of personal assets, separation clauses, and divorce conditions. Clear as day. This house was in my name, purchased before marriage with a student loan I'd worked nearly a decade to pay off. But in the version Landon put in front of me, that clause had been altered, not just changed, but rewritten in handwriting nearly identical to mine. Neat, rounded, steady. "I didn't sign this," I said, eyes locked on the page.
"Are you sure?" Landon shrugged, still smiling like a man offering a rational solution. "Maybe you were just too tired, don't remember, or—" I cut him off.
"You just said I don't have to carry the weight anymore. Then what about this? This house? The house I bought before I even met you. Why does it say joint marital property?" Landon looked at me like he was sitting across from a panicked patient. "Amber, do you realize how much stress you're under? Maybe we discussed it, and you just don't remember. I'm just helping you off the treadmill." I wanted to scream, but I knew Landon didn't respond to emotion. He responded to evidence, to logic, to planning, and so did I. I had lived too long in a family where everything was annotated, calculated, measured, but never understood. I folded the paper, slipped it into my bag, then stood up, went to the bedroom, grabbed my old laptop, and opened a handwriting comparison program, the kind I used when working with patients who had memory confusion. I took a photo of the Amber Whitmore signature from the divorce paper and compared it to the original signature from the prenup. The result: 90% match, but with signs of tracing. My hands shook. It felt like someone was peeling away layers of trust from me. Slowly, subtly, without me noticing. I called Danica, my best friend, also the hospital's forensic analyst. I need a pressure and fingerprint test, I said. Forged signature? She asked bluntly. More than that. Someone's reconstructing a marriage to end it on their own terms, I replied flat-toned. Danica agreed to help, discreetly. I sealed the divorce papers in an envelope and handed them to her the next morning, bypassing hospital mail. 3 days later, the results hit my personal email. 2 primary fingerprints on the document. One was mine, valid. The other belonged to my mother-in-law, Irene Whitmore. I froze. Irene didn't live with us. She rarely entered our home unannounced. But I knew one thing. She was a former head nurse, retired 6 years ago. A sharp, calculated woman, known for managing patients without medication. She once smiled at me and said, "A strong woman isn't the one who gets love. She's the one who knows when to step back to protect the family's name." Back then, I thought it was a traditional piece of wisdom. Now, I saw it as a warning. I began reviewing the security cameras around the house, something I rarely paid attention to since Landon managed the system. I opened the app, only to find myself logged out. Old password? No longer valid. I didn't panic. I went to the hospital's medical records vault, where the original prenup was stored, requested access to the secure box. The agreement was still there, intact, sealed. I examined it closely. The witness line on the original was blank. The one on our dinner table version was filled in. Marshall Whitmore. I photographed everything, sent it to my external hard drive. That evening, Landon came home from a board meeting. I was reading through clauses when he entered. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice oddly soft. "Figuring out why your mother's fingerprint is on a divorce petition I never signed," I answered flatly. Landon went quiet. After a long pause, he said, "She just wanted to make sure everything was ready in case things got hard." "And by hard, you mean what? Me not sleeping? Working too much, or maybe starting to notice things you didn't want me to see?" He bit his lip. His hands, resting on the table, trembled slightly. I looked at him, steadying my breath. "Are you sure you're protecting this family, or just executing someone's plan to erase me from it?" And in that moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Not guilt, but hesitation. Her office was in a red brick 3-story building about a 10-minute drive from the hospital where I worked. When I walked in, Avery was already waiting in a small second-floor conference room. A painting of the North Dakota landscape hung on the wall, a painting I knew she never liked but had never taken down. I didn't sit immediately. I took out my bag, opened each document, laid them across the table in perfect order. Video, medical record, marriage license, prenuptial agreement, divorce petition. Avery didn't ask questions. She scanned each document using her portable scanner. When she reached the psychological evaluation, she paused. "Veronica Whitmore?" She raised an eyebrow and read the evaluator's name out loud. I nodded, silent. "Does she currently have a valid license to practice?" "I'm not sure, but I'm guessing no." Avery nodded slowly, flipped the file over, and tapped her finger on the signature block. "Amber, if this person is no longer authorized to make clinical evaluations, this file isn't just worthless. It could be considered falsified medical documentation if it was used in any legal process." I leaned in. "And if it was used? If it's the reason I lost ownership of my house? Lost legal standing in my investments? Lost my say in my own marriage?" Avery looked up at me. "Then we'll reverse every single thing they've signed. But I need to know, are you sure that this was a calculated plan, not a mistake?" I took a slow breath, each word feeling like a door closing permanently behind me. "I'm sure. And I have one question, Avery. If someone was wrongly diagnosed with a mental disorder and signed a marital property agreement while not fully lucid, can that be overturned?" Avery pursed her lips. "Yes, with enough evidence, it can be challenged, especially if there are signs of coercion, forgery, or collusion." I nodded. "Then that's where we begin." Avery carefully stacked the documents, then handed me a legal authorization form. "I'll need permission to request a full review of all legal records tied to you and Landon. That includes marriage licenses, financial agreements, and any medical files used as evidence." I signed without hesitation. The pen hitting the paper felt like slicing through an invisible rope that had held me back for years. Before I left, Avery grabbed my wrist gently. I know you're logical, but from now on, don't handle this alone. If they've already touched medicine, money, and the law, nothing's off limits. I just looked at her. No smile. No thank you. We were beyond courtesies now. On the way home, I parked behind the hospital in a lot few people used. I pulled out my phone, logged back into our home security system, the one Landon had installed, but I had since reprogrammed with new passwords after realizing I was being manipulated. The screen loaded, living room, empty, kitchen, empty. I was about to check the backyard camera when I heard movement. A figure entered the frame, my mother-in-law. She carried a paper bag, placed it on the kitchen counter. Inside, a box of cookies and a jar of jam. I checked the timestamp. 3:17 p.m. I had made it clear to Landon I'd be working all day. No one would be home. So how did she get in? Key code? Private key? I rewound slowly. She opened the drawer under the sink and pulled out a small amber glass bottle, unlabeled. Her hands were steady. She poured a few drops into the jam jar, stirred it, wiped the rim with a napkin like a meticulous cook. My stomach turned, not because I feared being poisoned, but because I realized this wasn't the first time. I remembered those strange periods of exhaustion, sleeping for 3 days straight, losing short-term memory for hours. I used to think it was burnout, post-shift crash. But now, one by one, they returned like a sequence of stolen memories spliced together out of order. I recorded the clip, backed it up, and emailed it to Avery under the subject line. They didn't just sign for me. They tried to make me forget I ever existed. If you've ever thought you were just exhausted, only to discover the truth was an entire conspiracy, leave a comment. Because what I'm about to uncover is darker than anything I ever imagined. I still kept a small lockbox from college, where I used to stash handwritten letters from Mom, a few faded Polaroids, and a worn leather notebook. But today I opened it to retrieve something else. A letter Veronica once wrote to Landon, which I stumbled upon last year while cleaning his office. Back then, I didn't think much, just one line at the bottom stood out. Do not let her control any merged assets. You know how important that is. Landon told me not to worry, said Grandma always overreacted. Now I see, she never overreacted about anything. I sat in the dim glow of my home office, desk lamp illuminating the files, next to a cup of tea I brewed myself, from mint leaves picked in the garden, just to make sure no one else had touched it. I opened my laptop, started searching for Veronica Whitmore. Given her reputation as someone who once served on a hospital board, I expected some media trail. But what I found shocked me. Her public records disappeared from all Minnesota health systems after 2016. No interviews, no community work, no new photos. As if she'd vanished from public space, deliberately. I thought back to the one time I met her. It was during our engagement party at Marshall Whitmore's estate, a Georgian-style mansion with winding wood staircases, gold-trimmed windows, and a dining hall long enough to seat 20. Veronica descended from the second floor in silence, as if gliding through the air. She came straight to me, looked into my eyes without smiling, and said, "Whose daughter are you?" I hesitated. "I'm Amber. My mom is Nora. My dad passed when I was little." She nodded. Then turned to my future mother-in-law and said, "She has the face of a quiet one. But you know, quiet is often the hardest to control." At the time, I thought she was talking about personality. Now I realize she was talking about risk, about me being a variable. I called Avery the next morning, asking her to dig deeper into Veronica, especially any legal records, financial authorizations, or names tied to my medical files. 3 days later, Avery called back, and in her voice I heard something I'd never heard before, a trace of caution. "Amber," she said slowly, "I found a few things, and I think you need to listen closely." I put her on speaker and sat down, gripping my still warm cup. Veronica Whitmore was a co-signer on a medical power of attorney filed in 2019, right before you were listed for psychological monitoring in file EM Batter 0192. I held my breath. This authorization states that if your mental condition is deemed critically impaired, the rights to make decisions about your assets, treatment, and finances could be temporarily transferred to the next of kin. In the file, that person is listed as your husband, Landon, and the person who initiated the evaluation was his grandmother. I felt a wave of lightheadedness pass over me, as if everything about my life since 2019 had been scripted on paper to lead to one single outcome: removing me from the system legally. I asked, "Is that file legally valid?" Avery hesitated. "Here's the issue. The witness signature on that authorization is Marshall Whitmore, your father-in-law. And the notarization was done by someone named Elijah Bellman. Elijah is a retired attorney who worked with the Whitmore Family Trust for nearly 20 years. The name Bellman stopped me cold. I remembered Landon mentioning him once over dinner. He used to help Grandma with all the family disputes. Very discreet, very effective. Discreet, effective. I asked again, "Avery, in my marriage records, was there anyone who verified the legal documents for asset division?" Avery sighed before replying, "Amber, Elijah Bellman was the legal verifier for the final prenuptial agreement I just compared with the copy you have. There are two versions. One is unedited, with your signature. The other is notarized and filed in court, with added clauses that disadvantage you. And your signature looks identical, but it's not a perfect match." I didn't respond right away. I stared at the fireplace's glass cover, seeing my own reflection. 35 years old, hair pinned up, eyes heavy from too many sleepless nights. Then I spoke slowly. "So, Veronica handled the psych file. Marshall signed as a witness. Landon benefits. Bellman made it all legal. An entire system." Avery spoke gently. "Exactly. This isn't about marriage anymore, Amber. This is organized abuse. And if we can prove financial motive behind it, it could become criminal." I nodded, though she couldn't see me. I thought back to the first night I slept at the Whitmore estate after the wedding. Veronica had left a wool blanket on the sofa with a note. "No one finds peace without learning when to stay silent." I used to think it was advice. Now I know it was a warning. I looked out the window. The early spring wind was shaking the treetops outside. I thought to myself, I've been silent long enough. And they thought I'd never speak up, but they were wrong. This time I won't be quiet, and I won't go alone. I still remember standing outside the old wooden house in the outskirts of Boise, Idaho, a place so remote even GPS took a few seconds to locate it. In front of me was a faded white fence, a leafless old maple tree, and a wooden sign that read, "Shelby Winters, Homestead." Shelby was the first name I tracked down from the list of 5 women Avery had sent me. Women like me. Silenced, removed from the system, erased from their own life stories. I didn't call ahead. I wanted to look into her eyes, to see if there was something there that matched my own, worn-out clarity, wordless pain, and rage forced into quiet submission. The door opened after the second knock. A woman in her early 40s, short brown hair, wearing a thick gray sweater. Her face bore fatigue, but her eyes, sharp, alert, different. Bright, but not cold. Clear, but not sad. "Amber Whitmore?" she asked, unsurprised. I nodded. "I didn't think you'd know who I was." "I figured it out when I saw the Minnesota plates," Shelby said, then opened the door wider. "Come in. It gets cold here by afternoon." I stepped into a warm wooden house with a light cinnamon scent lingering in the air. Shelby poured me some tea, a ginger blend she dried herself from her backyard. Everything about this place felt patched together, like it had been mended after a storm no one ever talked about. I set my bag on the table and pulled out document copies. The psych record, the divorce petition, the financial authorizations, everything I once believed was unique to me. Shelby didn't need to read for long. When she saw the name Veronica Whitmore, her lips tightened. "She signed my documents too," Shelby said. "In mine, the diagnosis was mild delusional disorder, and the reason for hospitalization was an overreaction to my husband wanting to transfer some property." "Your husband was?" "Jonah Whitmore," Shelby said, like swallowing ice. I froze. Jonah was Landon's cousin. He used to work in oil and gas, disappeared from public records about 6 years ago. "You were married to Jonah?" Shelby nodded. "For only 2 years. But we were living in Houston at the time. No one paid attention. I leaned in. Do you remember anything from your time in the hospital? Shelby stared out the window. Not sure. I remember waking up in a white room, door locked electronically. The nurses didn't say their names. They gave me pills, told me to take them to stabilize my emotions. When I was discharged, our joint bank account had been closed. The house was already transferred to Jonah's name. I tried to fight it, but the legal documents said I was temporarily incapacitated to make decisions. A cold chill ran down my spine, like someone had taken my memories and attached a footnote to them, proof that everything I feared was real. Did you sue? I asked. Shelby shook her head. I tried, but no one believed me. The medical records were notarized. The signature was mine, even though I don't remember signing anything. They said I was making it all up to get assets back after the divorce. And I had no one to back me up. No friends, no lawyer, no cameras, no copies. I pulled out my phone. I opened the video clip I had from my kitchen camera, the one where my mother-in-law was putting something into the jam jar. Shelby stared, unblinking. Then she took my hand and gripped it tight. You have proof, she said. You have to see this through. I stayed with Shelby for over 3 hours that day. She named 4 other women who had come to her through private forums, women who once dated or married into the Whitmore family. One moved to Oregon. One disappeared without a trace after being committed to psychiatric care. The other 2 had contacted Shelby but later cut ties out of fear they were being watched. I saved the emails they sent. Not much. But one woman sent me a voice recording. It's fuzzy, but there's a man's voice saying, "She's not the problem, just get her to sign and get her out." I asked for the audio. Shelby transferred it to a tiny memory card and said, "I've kept this for 5 years. Now I think it belongs to you." I got back home after dark. Before going inside, I paused for a long time on the front steps. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel alone, because I knew I wasn't the first. And if I didn't do something, I wouldn't be the last either. I walked into the kitchen, looked around, then pulled out my phone and emailed Avery. Subject: We need more people. Body: I met with Shelby Winters, and what she told me mirrors my story in ways that are terrifying. I'm attaching an audio file. The man's voice isn't clear, but it can be analyzed. I think it's time we gather witnesses. And this time, we're not suing just for me, but for every person who was erased from their own life. If you've ever thought you were the only one who got hurt, read the comments others leave. Sometimes, the truth is bigger than what we've ever dared to face. I couldn't sleep for 2 nights after coming back from Idaho. My body was exhausted, but my mind wouldn't stop. Shelby's voice looped in my head. That audio recording. The look on my mother-in-law's face as she dropped that liquid into the jam jar like it was a routine habit. And the names of women I'd never met, whose stories were nearly carbon copies of my own. I felt like I was brushing up against something much bigger than a divorce, bigger than a rotten marriage. It was a system, one that had been carefully greased with social status, private attorneys, medical ties, and above all, the silence of its victims. And what chilled me more than anything, someone had died. Her name was Rachel Dwyer. I found her name in an old email Shelby had saved. Rachel had reached out to Shelby around 2016, just weeks before she passed away from suicide at a private facility in Michigan. I Googled her name, but only found a tiny obituary. Rachel Dwyer, 34, passed peacefully at Bloomfield Recovery Center. No funeral details available, no family, no photo, no farewell. I reached out to an investigative journalist I once worked with during a community health project in Minneapolis, Karen Liu. Karen had exposed multiple healthcare scandals and was the only person I trusted not to turn this pain into a headline. We met at a small lakeside coffee shop on a Saturday morning. Karen arrived right on time, no makeup, eyes sharp as glass. "Amber," she said after I finished most of the story, "I know the name Rachel Dwyer." I sat up straight. "You've met her?" Karen shook her head. "I heard her name in an internal lawsuit between 2 private hospitals. She used to work in the finance department of a long-term care home, then suddenly quit and was committed for treatment. No one knew the details, but there were rumors she had uncovered misappropriated inheritance funds. I handed her a copy of my own records. Do you think Veronica is connected? Karen looked at the paper, eyebrows furrowed. Veronica Whitmore's signature has shown up in multiple property transfers between patients and family members over the past 20 years. I've never dug deep into it, but I've always had a feeling something wasn't right. I sat still, gently holding my hot coffee. I don't want this to just be about me. I don't want this to be a personal tragedy. It's gone way beyond that. Karen nodded. Then let's do this. I'll start with Rachel's records. Are you willing for me to go public with what we find? No names, but real details to trigger new leads. I didn't answer right away. I stared out at the lake. A child was playing with his father, running on the grass, giggling. I wondered, if Rachel were alive, where would she be? Would she have her own family? A child? Or would she still be locked in a white building with windows that didn't open? I turned back to Karen. Post it. If even one person reads it and sees themselves in it, it's worth it. Karen nodded, her eyes lit with quiet resolve. I'll start with medical records and property transactions. It might take a week, but if I find anything big, you'll be the first to know. We left the cafe as the sun began to set. When I got in the car, my phone buzzed with a new message from an unknown number. You don't know what you're digging into. Be careful. Not everyone wants the truth to come out. I didn't reply. I took a screenshot and sent it to Avery and Karen. Below the image, I typed just one sentence. They're watching. Karen replied 10 minutes later. Good. When the powerful start threatening you, it means they're scared. Avery was even more direct. Store all evidence in 3 places. 1 online, 1 hard drive, 1 on paper. Don't go anywhere alone after dark. And Amber, this isn't divorce anymore. This is criminal. That night, I didn't turn on the lights in the living room. I sat in the dark, my laptop casting a bluish glow, documents scrolling across the screen. A scanned copy of Veronica's medical evaluation for Rachel from 2016. The distorted voice recording from Shelby. The video of my mother-in-law in the kitchen. Each file was a fragment of a larger picture coming into focus, a network of women pushed to the margins, labeled unstable, and stripped of their identity, their assets, their lives. And if I didn't break the cycle, there would be another. Another woman dismissed as too sensitive. Just a little fragile, better off letting the family decide. I couldn't let that happen again. I opened a new file. I typed the title with all the clarity and quiet rage I could gather. A list of women erased from their own lives. I began writing. Not with tears, but with evidence. Each name, each date, each signature. Each death labeled as sudden or voluntary. Each bruise, each memory lapse, each helpful relative making decisions on someone's behalf. I wrote as if someone would read it and understand that we existed, that we tried to speak. And finally, someone had listened. I met with Avery again on Monday morning, at a secure office on the east side of Minneapolis, a temporary space she had arranged. No signage, no business name, just 3 chairs and an old printer in the corner. She greeted me not with the composure of a lawyer, but with the silent understanding of a woman who knows justice and truth often live on opposite sides of a battlefield. I've sent your file and Shelby's to the local prosecutor's office, Avery said, sliding a folder toward me. They're evaluating whether to open a preliminary investigation into abuse of power in the medical and financial sectors. But to move forward, we'll need more. I'm working on the list, I said. 1 person at a time. And I'm tracking legal ties to individuals involved, she added, including Veronica, Marshall, and especially Elijah Bellman. That name is standing out. I looked out the window, where a light snowfall had begun. Even in April, Minnesota's winter never surrendered early. Amber, Avery continued, there's an option. We can request a closed-door hearing with the federal court. Your identity stays protected for now, but we present the full evidence. If approved, they can subpoena witnesses, issue document requests, and freeze assets if there's risk of tampering. I nodded. Let's do it. She handed me a short document, just 3 pages. At the bottom, petitioner's signature, Amber Whitmore. I read it over once, then signed without hesitation. Before the ink had even dried, Avery was sealing each page in a plastic sleeve. "From this point forward," she said quietly, "you're no longer just a victim. You're the lead plaintiff in a case that could grow big. Every step, every word must be calculated. But you're not alone." I tightened the strap of my bag and stood up. I didn't feel lighter, but I felt clearer than I had in months. That afternoon, I got a call from an unknown number. The woman on the line sounded shaky. "My name is Hazel." I read the article by the journalist Karen. I think I'm part of this too," I gently asked. Hazel explained that she had once been engaged to a man named David Whitmore, a cousin from the Michigan branch of the family. After a property dispute with David's sister, Hazel was hospitalized for paranoia and emotional instability. When she got out, she no longer had ownership of the house she had once co-owned with David. "I signed a paper. While sedated," Hazel said. "I don't remember it. They told me I had to sign to be released." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. "Do you still have any records?" I asked. "Yes, I kept photocopies, and a letter from the nurse who witnessed it. She retired, but left it for me before she left. In the letter, she said she had once been pressured by Veronica." I sat up straight. "Would you be willing to come forward as a witness if we take this public?" Hazel was silent for a long time. Then she said, "I don't know if I have the strength, but if it helps keep people like me from being quietly erased, then yes." I thanked her, gave her Avery's encrypted email address, and told her to stay in contact. That evening, I called Shelby. She had just gotten back from visiting an old friend, and during the trip, she found an internal report from 2014 bearing Veronica Whitmore's signature next to a recommendation to reevaluate the financial competency of patients experiencing emotional distress post-divorce. We compared notes. The wording in that report was nearly identical to the psychiatric notes in my own file. Only the name and the year were different. I looked at my computer screen, where nearly 10 folders now sat, each labeled with a potential victim's name. Shelby, Hazel, Rachel, and now Claire, a new name that had surfaced from an anonymous post in a Facebook group on women's legal rights. Each woman was a thread in the web Veronica had spun. But the deeper I dug, the more I noticed a pattern. Not everyone had the same experience. Some lost assets. Some were denied child custody. Some were made to suffer temporary memory loss. But what they all had in common, every case had gone through one person, Veronica. And in some files, another name had co-signed, Elijah Bellman. I texted Karen. "I think it's time to bring Bellman into the light. If it comes to it, I'll speak, no more aliases." Karen replied with one line. "I'm writing the big story now. It goes live tomorrow. Be ready." I smiled, not from joy, but because I could finally picture the name Veronica Whitmore on a headline no longer tied to the Minnesota State Health Board, but instead, lead suspect in federal psychiatric record tampering investigation. If you've ever been doubted, dismissed, or told you're just imagining things, this is your moment to speak up. Leave a comment below. Maybe you're not the only one. I couldn't sleep the entire night after Karen's story went live. By 8 o'clock in the morning, the news had hit the front pages of 3 major newspapers in Minneapolis. A bold headline sliced across the family name like a blade. Former state health board member under investigation for abuse of power and manipulation of psychiatric records for financial gain. They named Veronica Whitmore, but the photo that accompanied the article was a group shot, her standing beside my father, Mr. Whitmore, at a medical research fundraiser. The caption underneath sent chills down my spine. Whitmore family suspected of orchestrating a network to legitimize psychiatric monitoring of female relatives. I sat in the living room, laptop on my lap. Shelby was next to me, still holding her teacup, but it was clear her mind wasn't in the room. "What do you think she'll do?" she asked. I didn't answer. I knew Veronica. I had once admired her. I had once feared her. But above all, I understood one thing. She would not stay silent. And just as I expected, by 10 a.m., a second article appeared on social media, posted by an anonymous account, seemingly someone in the professional field, challenging Karen's report. It claimed that the individual filing the complaint has a history of emotional instability and previous psychiatric hospitalization. "They're talking about me," I said quietly, eyes still on the screen. Shelby set her teacup down, her expression shifting into something calm, almost cold. "We predicted this," she said. "The first strike is always character assassination." Avery called just as I was about to shut the laptop. "Amber, don't worry. The response from independent media is still leaning in our favor. 3 more people have come forward confirming your story. One of them, named Claire, submitted a critical piece of evidence, a recording where Veronica clearly says, if she doesn't agree to sign over the conservatorship, I can easily alter her diagnosis file." It hit me like a cold bucket of water. Not because I was shocked, but because it confirmed everything. We immediately forwarded the recording to the prosecutor. By late afternoon, the sheriff's department announced they were seeking search warrants for 3 facilities tied to the mental health network Veronica had helped establish. That night, Shelby and I had dinner in silence. The fireplace hummed softly, warm light spilling over the wall map where I'd marked every woman who had spoken out. "Shelby," I finally said, "if tomorrow everything turns against me, if the court declares I'm mentally unfit to represent myself." She looked at me, no hesitation in her voice. "I'll stand in for you. I'll use my name, my voice, and I'll keep going, even if they freeze our accounts, twist every word we've said." I nodded. No tears fell, but my throat tightened. I wasn't the abandoned one anymore. I wasn't alone anymore. A few days later, a morning news segment accelerated everything faster than we expected. A former psychiatrist from the Oak Ridge Center, the facility where I had once been treated, came forward. He confirmed that numerous patient files had been updated by an individual without a medical license. He explained that during one incident, he had been forced to sign off on a misdiagnosed patient and had left behind a hidden note, a small symbol in the margin of page 3. I pulled out my own file. The symbol was there. We had formal proof. Records had been illegally altered. At the same time, surveillance footage from the center was recovered, thanks to an IT technician who had secretly kept a backup because something just didn't feel right. In the video, Veronica is clearly seen instructing staff not to allow me to make any phone calls when I was admitted. The justification recorded: to prevent unnecessary panic among family members. What family? She gave no answer, just stood up and walked out of the observation room. 3 days later, the court issued its first subpoenas. Veronica, Elijah, and 2 women listed as directors of the medical facility where I had been placed under mandatory psychiatric supervision. I sat in the courthouse hallway, gripping the certified folder in my lap. Shelby joined me, handing me a newspaper. I looked at the photo on the front page. This time, it wasn't Veronica shaking hands with anyone. It was a still image from the recovered surveillance footage, her standing by the door, hand on the knob, eyes looking down at me as I was being held back by 2 nurses. The bold headline read, "The Rise of a Woman Erased. Amber Whitmore Speaks Out." I stepped through the wooden gate of the house in the Minneapolis suburbs for the first time in over 2 years. The lawn had been freshly trimmed. The white picket fence still bore the same old cracks. But the silence was strange. No mother's nagging voice, no father's lectures about success, no faint buzz from the old air conditioner wheezing through early winter. It was just a house. I set my canvas bag on the porch step and pulled out the old key from my wallet. My hands trembled, not from fear, but from a storm of emotions I couldn't name. It felt like I was walking into something that used to be memory, used to be pain, and was finally becoming the past. The court had restored ownership of the house. After Veronica and Elijah were removed from all legal positions and placed under investigation, the appellate board reviewed the conditions I had once been subjected to and declared me a victim of a systematically flawed process. It didn't erase the memories, but it stripped away the label I'd been branded with: mentally unstable. The living room looked exactly as it had the last time I saw it, except this time, I wasn't being dragged into it in tears. I stood in the center of the room and let the quiet sounds echo through my memory. I pulled out a cardboard box and began packing the things I wanted to keep. A photo of my grandmother, an old album, a letter my mother had written but never sent. I had found it in the drawer next to her bed. "Amber, I'm sorry I didn't step in sooner. There were times I thought staying silent was safer, but that silence hurt you more than any lie ever could. I sat down, the paper shaking in my hands. I didn't cry. I didn't need to. I'd already cried through all the nights alone, all the times I was deemed too unstable to make decisions about my own life. Shelby arrived just after noon, carrying 2 bags of takeout and a box of cookies. "What do we do first?" she grinned. "Paint the kitchen? Replace the curtains? Or burn that old sofa?" I laughed. "Let's keep the sofa. It's where I wrote my first petition to get out of the facility. It's basically a historic artifact now." We both burst out laughing. And for the first time in a long while, laughter in this house wasn't tied to tension or the fear of being watched. A few weeks later, I opened my own office, a small organization called the Foundation for Unheard Daughters. It wasn't big, it wasn't flashy. But inside, there were chairs for women who had once been stripped of their autonomy, workshops to help them reclaim their voices, and a team of volunteer attorneys standing behind every petition to restore personal rights. We received hundreds of handwritten letters and emails each week. Some people only wrote a single line. "Thank you for making me feel less alone." I kept every letter. There were still mornings when I woke up mid-dream, thinking I was locked in that windowless room again. But then I'd wake up for real, see sunlight pouring through the new curtains, see Shelby brewing coffee in the kitchen, see my name properly written on every legal document. I am Amber Whitmore, and I no longer need permission to be myself. My story doesn't end with revenge or triumph. It ends with something much simpler: the right to live freely. And sometimes, that is the greatest victory of all. If you've ever known what it feels like to be dismissed, treated as if your very existence is a burden, then maybe you understand me better than anyone else could. Everyone has their limit, and sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting back in rage, but quietly rising, walking away, and rebuilding your life from the wreckage. What about you? What do you think of the way I chose to end everything? If it were you, would you have done it differently? I truly want to hear your thoughts, because this story, like so many others about family, is never just one person's story. If this touched something in your heart, please leave a comment, share your thoughts, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel to hear more real, emotional stories about family, forgiveness, and the journeys we take to find ourselves again.